Good morning, everyone. You're welcome to this productivity session this morning, where we're going to talk about how to manage your stakeholders. My name is Moira Dunn, and I'm delighted to be with you here for this next hour or so. I'm going to share my slides just now. So hopefully you can all see that now and can hear me loud and clear. As I said, you're really welcome to this session, and thank you for taking an hour out of your busy working day. I know while the online sessions are really convenient, sometimes when it comes to it, it's hard to take that hour, isn't it? Particularly when we're in the middle of a busy day. And I suppose that's what we're going to touch on with our theme today, is that busyness and how we can manage and stay on top of things. But well done for showing up. And let's get, hopefully you'll get some good value out of the next hour or so. It is a little bit interactive, so I encourage you to engage. I've got a couple of questions for you and one or two things I'll ask you to think through. And if you can engage in the chat, that's fantastic. That encourages other people to get involved. And it does mean that you apply your mind to the topic and you'll get more from it and go away maybe with actually some ideas of things that you can implement straight away that will help you to manage your stakeholders. So what are we going to talk about today? Three key things. And the first one is how to control your response time. So we're going to take a look at when you get requests from your stakeholders, how you can control your response time. Building on that, how you can say yes on your own terms. And I'll explain exactly what I mean by all of this shortly. And then the important piece, into the longer term to sustain any changes is to set and agree expectations with your stakeholders, whether it be your outgoing or ingoing requests that come from those stakeholders. So it'll all make sense as I work through it. The purpose of the session is really to give you some new ideas, maybe some tips, and also the motivation to make some changes so that you can perhaps keep more in control of your time and deal with those requests and responses from stakeholders that you interact with throughout the day. Often when I run my sessions, people will say to me, yeah, I've heard that before. And I often say, well, are you able to do it and apply it in your busy work environment? Because really, when you think about it, our work environments have changed so much in recent years. So maybe the things we did before aren't working as well. So often it is a reminder of something that maybe isn't an ideal, a good thing to do. And we just get out of the habit of doing it. So hopefully that's something you'll get from the session as well. We have some resources for you. There's a reference guide, which is a copy of the slides. So you don't have to worry about writing things down. You'll have a full copy of that. I think it was sent out to you yesterday, but actually there's an updated version of that reference guide that will go out to you after today's session, along with a template, which is the stakeholder analysis template. And I'll be talking about that template and how you can use it later on in the session. So look out for those good resources because it means you're something to refer to after today's session. Just this slide really is to introduce myself. Who are you listening to for the next hour? That's me up there on the screen. I'm a productivity and well-being consultant. Started out my career many years ago as a biochemist. I've come from a technical background. I won't go through the whole career history, but it's some highlights are up there on the screen. I really focused in on helping people get more from their workday and trying to share the tips and learnings, I suppose, from my corporate career over 30 years. Started BeProductive.ie in 2016, and it really was in response to working with people on projects and training and just picking up on that increased stress that people were feeling. And I was thinking, what can I do to help people really manage their time and stay in control and feel productive? So that's where Be Productive came from. I'll share all the links with you later, so how you can stay in touch with me for regular updates. I regularly write articles for Briefly. You may have seen some of those over the last few months, and deliver training as well. So moving along, really just to say, I suppose, why are we talking about managing our stakeholders? And if any of you want to pop into chat and pop in any questions you have specifically about how you can manage your stakeholders, please do that. obviously it's great to get your specific questions, and I'll keep an eye on the chat throughout the session. But in general terms, why is this even a topic that we're interested in? Well, it's actually a topic that when I work with my clients, it's one of the ones that is their most favorite one to get some tips on. Because I suppose throughout our working day, we have lots of different stakeholders. We have internal stakeholders. So, who are our stakeholders? The key people that we interact with throughout our working day, the key people that we have to respond to, key people who we want to respond to us as well. So it works both ways. So we may be dependent on someone providing us with an input or an update before we can progress our work as well. We have external stakeholders as well as internal ones. And it's really good, even, I suppose, just to make that list of who are my key stakeholders, who are the people that I do need to be available for, to respond to, and to find time for. Of course, when we have all those requests incoming, maybe somebody's asking us to do something, we can expect that, or very often those requests are unexpected. So we maybe plan out our working day and then we get some requests from some key stakeholders, and we need to prioritize that. And then outgoing, as I said briefly, we may be dependent on other people to do something. We might need an input from somebody else. So they're the outgoing requests that we have. And of course, it's hard to manage that timeline, isn't it? And, we need to look at how we can engage people, how we can get people, I suppose, to prioritize our priorities. And that's often something people ask me for tips about. So we may be dependent on an input from somebody else, but it's not top of their list. And I suppose managing any change as well that comes with that. So a lot of it is around managing relationships and really managing our communication, isn't it? It's how we respond to a request or how we position a request to somebody else. So thinking about that relationship, thinking about the person that we're asking maybe to input something, considering it from their perspective as well, what's going to be realistic and reasonable for them. And managing expectations as well, so we can manage our response time, manage the expectations of others when they are going to get a reply or a response from us. So there's lots of different layers and levels to this, and you're probably thinking, how are we going to cover all this in a short webinar? But I'm going to give you some key pointers on those factors. So when we're dealing with stakeholder requests, what are we dealing with? Well, some of those requests might be new things that crop up throughout the day. If we look at this item over here on the left-hand side. So it's an unplanned piece of work. Or it could be changes to our planned work. So maybe we've set out, we've agreed certain things with a stakeholder. It might be a project you're working on, or you've agreed to deliver something for someone, but then there's a change to that plan. The deadline might change. So something you were planning to deliver by Friday, now somebody's looking for it this afternoon or tomorrow. Our meetings, they're often requests from stakeholders as well, where maybe we're asked to go to a meeting that we weren't expecting to go to, and that's last minute as well. So that has an impact on us. And all of that impacts our time, our output of other things, and our productivity. So that feeling of being able to get done what we had planned to do. And it can lead to very, very busy days that, are filled with interruptions with those requests. It can cause us to have to switch tasks. So we might be working on one thing and then a request comes in. It pulls us away from that task. And not only does it take our time away, but all that switching erodes our mental energy. And, we can end up feeling frazzled, like the guy in the photograph here, that, we sometimes get to the point in the day where we've just had so many requests, we can't really think straight. And that's natural. And there's lots of science behind it that shows us that switching of tasks erodes our mental energy. So that even by the end of the day, you may find time to catch up on a planned piece of work, but sometimes we can't focus. We can't get the work done. Our brain just doesn't settle on the task. And that's an important thing to tune into and to be aware of as well. So it can lead to very, very busy days where we can have this feeling of such a busy day, but I feel like I got nothing done. whoever has had that kind of a day, and pop into chat if that resonates with you. What does that even mean? You know, I've gone nonstop all day, but at the same time, at the end of the day, I don't feel happy with my day's work. You might leave and finish your day with a nagging feeling because maybe there was something you planned to do, but you didn't get to it. And that actually can lead to a lot of stress for us. So, you know, it's important to get a handle on that, to tune into it and see, well, is there anything I can change to change the way maybe I handle my time and my interaction with others? So if we're not getting to do our planned work, you know, what's happening? Why is it? Where is my time going? And what's not getting done? So what are maybe the key things that get dropped when I get requests that weren't expected? What am I dropping to respond to those stakeholders? And are they important pieces of work that I'm dropping? So we're going to delve into that a little bit more as well. So I suppose at this stage, I'm just kind of setting the scene and posing a lot of questions to get you thinking about how your day goes, what's happening, where your time goes. And as I said, I invite you to pop into chat and share with me any question you have in relation to managing your stakeholders, or just even describe a scenario, what happens for you, what you find most difficult to deal with, any specific questions that you have. Of course, our stakeholder relationships are so important. As I've said already, they're the key people we interact with. It may be key projects that we're working on. It could be external clients or even internal clients. We may have internal clients that we have responsibility to respond to, senior people who we get requests from. And of course, that's so important that we respond. And very often they're urgent requests, and we have to, you know, respond in a timely way to those requests. And often we feel pressure to do that. It's all part of delivering in our role and meeting our targets. So that's why it's really good to kind of step back and even do that piece of work to say, okay, in my role, my responsibilities are X. These are my key stakeholders. And these are the people that I need to prioritize. And we may find that we have lots of other stakeholders that maybe aren't as high a priority. And sometimes they are the ones that maybe do ask us to do lots of things. It's important to kind of sort that out in our heads. And the template I'm going to share with you later helps you to do that. Because then you can start to identify who are the key priorities, who are the ones that, you know, I need to prioritize maybe over others. Because the thing is, we do have a finite amount of time, and we want to make sure that we are using our time in the best way to deliver in our role to meet our targets. So, you know, that sounds very clear, but sometimes we end up spending time on things because somebody has an expectation of it. They want us to help them. And of course, we need to do that. But we need to look at what we're prioritizing, and are we using our time in the best way that we should? And I can see we have a question coming through, so I'll just take that at the moment. At what point does one know that a stakeholder style is not compatible long-term to a professional relationship despite one's best efforts, and thus when and how to cut ties? Well, that's a big question. Thank you for it. And I'm going to leave it for now, because actually I'm going to come up with some responses, some ideas on how we can respond to our stakeholders and maybe adjust how we interact with them. So I'm going to leave it for now, but thank you so much for sending it in, and I will come back to it because it'll be there on the chat and the Q&A. So we'll come back and refer to it when we get into that kind of response piece, and it might just give you some ideas that will help you deal with that specific situation. So thank you for sharing, and please, anybody else who wants to pop anything into the Q&A box, please do that. So that's kind of setting the scene of who our key stakeholders are. So even if you have a pen and paper, you might want to start jotting down your key stakeholders, and we'll look at our response times per stakeholder a little bit later in the session. The problem, of course, as we've alluded to, let's just pull it together on this slide, is we're not spending time on our planned work when we're responding to our stakeholders. Now, of course, it's a big part of our day. So what I will be talking to you about shortly is getting the balance between the two. So there might be a certain amount of time that we want to spend on our planned work each day, but we have to be available as well to respond to our stakeholders. But even if we plan maybe an hour or 2 hours to get something key done, we often get pulled away from that. We drop it because maybe the request seems more urgent. And of course, if we keep pushing out our planned work, eventually that becomes urgent. And usually that's high priority work or important work. And that's why we've made a plan for it. And I'll build on that shortly. Sometimes we end up working on a task that is a lower priority than what we planned to do. And that's what can often lead us to that sense of frustration at the end of the day, that we've worked on something that maybe it was someone else's high priority, but not our high priority, but we maybe felt a pressure to spend time on it, to respond to that request because maybe it was urgent and the person needed it urgently. And that may be the right decision. But if it's happening a lot, then it does mean that we maybe need to look at it and see what we can adjust. The other thing that I think is really important to bear in mind that we do have a finite amount of time. So if we keep saying yes to every new request that comes in, we actually are potentially saying no to something we previously agreed to from another stakeholder because something is going to drop, something is going to give. So we need to be aware of that as well, because when we do come to try and negotiate our response time to those new requests, sometimes we feel guilty about not saying yes to everything. But do bear in mind that if we keep saying yes to the new requests, we may be saying no to something that not only are our planned work, but something that, we had said yes, we committed to, and maybe that is your planned work for another stakeholder and they're expecting it. So, we're going to either not deliver that or going to deliver that late. So again, it's a lot of juggling, isn't it? And considering what's the best decision. And hopefully I'm going to give you some ideas on doing that. The other thing that we often end up doing is working late to deal with the additional requests. People say to me, I have to say yes to everything. I have to do it. I just have to stay late to do it. And, that's okay. Everybody stays late occasionally, but we don't want to have to do it all the time because it really does start to impact on our productivity, our ability to get our job done, our well-being, our overall work-life balance. So if that's happening on a regular basis, again, it's looking at it and saying, well, what can I adjust here? I'm here, I'm putting in my full working day. That should be enough to deliver in my role. And I shouldn't have to work late on a regular basis. Of course, as I said, we all do it occasionally. But working late regularly means, that we're maybe missing things for, our personal stakeholders. So we might have commitments that we're dropping or missing, or our own personal well-being, our exercise, our activities outside of work. And they're all really important because they all feed into our productivity. If we get a chance to refresh, switch off in the evenings, we potentially have a better night's sleep. It means that we have a freer head when we come into work the next day. We're more likely to have a very productive day the next day. Whereas the opposite can happen if we work late on a regular basis. We maybe are productive in those extra hours and we get something delivered, but it's very often going to impact our rest, our ability to refresh, our sleep time. And it can erode our productivity the next day. So sometimes by working late and staying late, we're stealing our productivity from the next morning because you'll find you're tired. Sometimes it's better off to finish your workday as you planned, maybe readjust your plan for the next day, but go away and leave your work behind you. So obviously that's a big discussion as well. If anybody has any questions around that, pop them into the Q&A box. The other thing that's happening is we're often pulled into things that maybe are not in our role when we get requests from our stakeholders. And it'd be interesting if any of you can relate to that. So that often happens if maybe we have very good relationships with people. And of course, we want to maintain that because that's key. But it might be legacy requests that come through to you that maybe, your role has changed now. You've maybe delegated some of your tasks to other people, or your responsibilities have changed, but people maybe still come to you as the go-to person because they have that relationship. And that can often mean that we get asked to do things that aren't in our key list of priorities. And sometimes, it's just a quick thing and we think, oh, I'll do that, because I want to help that person out. I want to maintain that relationship. It's a quick thing. I can do it. It's not going to take too much time. But do you remember that brain switching? Every switch that we do, every time we leave the work that we're doing currently, it can take us up to 23 minutes to get our focus when we switch back. So even if we only switch for 5 or 10 minutes to do something, it can have an impact on our ability to get our work done. So again, it's that juggling. Is it the right decision? And the impact of that interruption. Should I be responding to it? So just, if we are getting pulled into things that are not in our role, it can be really useful to start to keep track of that and get a handle on, 4 or 5 requests a day that actually probably should be going to another team or another resource. Keep track of it and maybe add up in the week what that equates to. And then the next time you're having a review or one-to-one meeting with your team leader, your manager, whoever can help you make changes, you can just present that in a way of, those requests still come through to me. I'm more than happy to help people. It does mean, it takes up probably about 2 hours a week. That's 2 hours away from our key projects. I'm happy enough to do it. Are you happy enough that I keep doing that? And often when you get the data and the metrics, somebody will say, oh no, I don't want you spending time on that. It's much more important that you spend time on this. So let me look at what we can readjust. So that idea of, getting a handle, getting the metrics, getting the data behind something, rather than maybe expressing frustration and saying, I'm always getting asked to do things from that team. If you have some data, then you can have a much more objective, less emotional discussion about it. So again, if that resonates with anyone, let me know. So that planned work, you're not getting time to do it. Your list can get longer and longer. And of course, that can lead us to, feel overwhelmed and stressed because our planned list, that to-do list, just keeps growing. And we have to start looking at it and saying, well, why am I not getting to things? Where is my time going? And can I see any pattern to that? And is there anything I can do to start making changes? So I'm going to, we'll run the poll now, Chris, if you'd like to run it. And I want to get some input from you. Which of those issues that I listed can you relate to? So we're starting to see the results come up on the screen, and not spending time on what we plan to deliver at the moment, saying 38%. So that's in the lead, followed by working late. Yeah, I know. And then pulled into things that are not your role. So they're the top things, and they're all things that, we want to really change that, don't we? And we want to look at, well, why, are we spending time on these requests? Is it the right decision? And is there anything we can do to adjust things? So thanks so much for interacting with that. That just gives me a flavor of the key things that are relevant to you. Okay, so where are we now? The key thing is we want to aim for balance. So that's what it's all about, really. Is we can't take, book out our whole day with planned work and, just ignore everyone, because we have a duty to be responsive to those stakeholders, our clients, our colleagues, our managers, senior people in the organization, somebody who needs something urgently. So it's really about trying to get the balance, isn't it? It's about being able to protect some time. I really should have some there. It's not all your time, because in our environments nowadays, with the flow of information, with so many ways of contacting each other, so many requests come in throughout the day that it's not feasible to plan out your whole day and get your planned work done, because we have to be available. Everybody has a responsive element to their role. And it is important to start thinking about that. Thinking about the two modes that we work in: responsive mode when we're available to others, and then planned mode when we want to maybe protect our time from interruptions. And if we want to try and start making changes, the first step is to tune into that, and then to say, okay, how can I start to plan out my time, plan out my week, so that I can protect some time for my planned work, but also have time available to be responsive. What's happening nowadays is that most of us are working all day, every day in a responsive mode, and we're not protecting time, even an hour a day, even an hour or two a week to get those key planned priority pieces of work done. And I suppose our environment has become so responsive. When I work with people and talk to people about this, they're kind of saying, I didn't think I kind of could do that. I thought I had to be available all the time. So it is really important to think about how we can carve out some time for planned work in our week while still being available to be responsive to others. And hopefully I'll be able to give you some ideas on that. Someone says I could have selected more than one of that poll, all result in constantly working late. That's it. They're so interlinked, aren't they? And working late is in an output from it. And so really, if I can give you some ideas that can help you adjust that, that would be success today. So let's see how we can take control of the week. And some of you maybe have been on some of my previous webinars where I would have shared some of these tips that underpin how we can manage our response times. So just bear with me for a few slides while we set the scene. How do we take control of the week? Well, the key thing is to make a plan. And you might immediately be thinking, there's no point in making a plan because, I get to mid-Monday morning and the plan's gone out the window. And I get that. I understand that because in our world nowadays, things change so much and so quickly. Years ago, we could make a plan and there was 2 postal deliveries a day before all of our technology, and nothing really changed much throughout the day. So the best time managers were the ones who made the best plans. Because there was very little to pull us away from those plans, but it's a really different world. So we need a different approach and we need different skills. So let's see what I mean by making a plan. For me, it's about at the start of the week saying, what are the priorities this week? And identifying 1, 2, 3 key things. So consider, what are the key things that I need to get done this week? What are the key deliverables? What will make the week a success? So often it's useful to project forward. When it gets to Friday, what am I going to be happy with having delivered? So there'll be lots of other things, but what are the key things? And what I do is I stick them up on my productivity wall here in the background, but I only really identify 3 things. There'll be lots of small tasks that you do along the way, but it's kind of saying to yourself or discussing with your boss or discussing with your team or maybe your key stakeholders and saying, if all else fails, no matter what else we do this week, we have to deliver these 3 key things. And it might be just 1 key thing or 2 key things, but identify them at the start of the week. Because by doing that, you have a much greater chance of getting time to do those things because it keeps them front and center. As I said, I stick them up on my wall. And, when it gets to Wednesday and the week's gone crazy and lots of new things have cropped up, sometimes it's even a reminder. I'm going, oh yeah, I was going to get time for those 3 things that I haven't gotten near it yet. But it reminds you. And then from Wednesday onwards, you're saying, okay, well, what's realistic? Maybe I'll only get 2 things done. Maybe I'll only get 1 thing done. But when am I going to do it? Let's protect the time to do it. So by even articulating it, writing it down, putting it in your journal, putting it in your electronic time manager, whatever you use, or discussing it with your team or your colleagues or your boss on a Monday morning, saying these are the key things I'm focusing on this week. That creates an accountability, but it also, we're going to see shortly, it helps you to negotiate when other things crop up. So making that plan is the first thing. Then when are we going to find time to work on those priorities? So proactively, what you can do is block time in your diary. And this is a technique that increasingly people are using to help them take control of some of their time. Now you'll see what I'm doing there. I'm blocking in an hour. It maybe looks like longer than that, the way I've done the graphic. But I'm looking ahead at my week. And of course, all my days aren't free. If you looked at your diary, wouldn't it be great if every day was white like that? But of course it isn't. I just haven't put in all the other activities. You might have meetings booked in, recurring events. But looking ahead before you get into the week, I always say, plan your week before everybody else does. So look for the opportunity. When can I work on those priorities? So maybe an hour early some mornings, some people call it a power hour before everything else starts happening. Or it could be towards the end of the day when everything else gets done. You might find that the request flow is less. Or look at your week and see what day is the best opportunity to get a planned hour, a time block that you can stick to. Sometimes people are finding maybe Fridays, the email flow or the notification flow isn't as busy because maybe some people aren't working Fridays. So look at your week. Don't put a time block in your diary on your busiest day. So for a lot of people, Wednesday is a real busy day. So maybe that's the worst time to put a time block in. Put it in at a time when you're most likely going to be able to stick to it and not get a flow of other requests that you feel you have to prioritize. So with time blocking, you know, if some of you may time block already, some people time block their entire week. Some people use time blocks to do structured email blocks of time, and we did a webinar on that last year. So look at what you can time block in. If you're new to it, I would just try out one time block in the week, even 1 hour that you put in for next week, and see if you can stick to it. And then when you get to the end of the week or when you're planning the following week, look at whether you were able to stick to it. And if you weren't, it might be, well, actually, that's a really busy day. So that's probably the worst day to do it. So let me try a different time for my time block. But the idea is that once you've blocked in time for that priority work, a few things happen. The first thing is it reminds you when the time comes up, because if you've actually booked it in your diary, and that's what I'm suggesting, put it in your Outlook, you're blocking time with yourself. The reminder comes up and it reminds you to do it. Now, maybe at that particular time, something is really urgent. And if you prioritize that, that's your decision, but at least you're making a comparison and you're saying, I'd plan to do this key thing. Is this a higher priority? And maybe it is. But what you will end up doing then is moving the time block till a later time in the day. You're less likely for it to drop and get forgotten. It's there, it's front and center, you're going to move it. Or you may decide that actually the priority, the time block, is the one I need to prioritize. So I'll do the other piece after I've done my time block. And we'll look at how to communicate that shortly. So that's your time blocking. It reminds you, it gives you a focus, and it gives you a baseline to negotiate your response time to new things that crop up. So a new stakeholder request, you can now assess the new request based on what you plan to do. You'd maybe already agreed these priorities with your team leader, your project lead, whatever it is. Now you can assess the new request. Is it the higher priority? What should I spend my time on? And what's the best use of time to deliver in my role? So it's back to that question, rather than what do I feel like doing? What do I feel pressure to do? What's the best use of time in my role? Because if what you'd planned to do is the best use of time in your role, then that gives you a good position to discuss with someone, maybe not there and then, but at a later point, if you find you have to compromise your plan because you feel a pressure to respond to the new request. So let's build on that. Some of the ways you can do it, that I actually started doing this a few years ago. When someone asks me to do something that wasn't planned, I say, of course, when do you need it? And it's amazing how that simple question shifts the dynamic in the response, because it prompts the other person to think, well, when do I need it? Now, maybe 90% of the time they're going to say now, today, straight away. But people will surprise you and they'll say, oh, it's fine by the end of the day or first thing tomorrow morning. What we often will do when we get a new request is we immediately assume that we need to do it straight away. So, and I do it. I see emails coming in. I'm thinking, I'll have to get to those emails now. I don't even know what they are. They could be, you know, a request for a meeting in 2 weeks' time. It's not urgent. So it helps us to start to negotiate the response time. You can then say when you can do it. So if someone says, I need it straight away, you could say, of course, I'll do that for you. I'm working on something right now. I'll get back to you by 12 o'clock with the figures or whatever it is. And they may say, no, actually, I need it straight away. I need it before 12. And that's fine. And maybe that's what you have to do. But you'll find that, you know, by having this discussion, people will say that's fine, more times than not. So if you give the reasons based on what you were working on, what you plan to do, if the other person is aware of that work, they may say, yeah, that's fine, focus on that, get that delivered. And if you get it back to me by lunchtime, that's okay. So what you want to do is negotiate a time that suits you both. And that is reasonable because you plan your time, you've got other stakeholders, you've got other requests. So let's look at when they need it and see what you can do to deliver that. And try and find something that suits you both. There will be situations where it is super urgent and you have to just do it straight away. So that's the proviso, that you will do that. You will use your judgment, but start looking at all the responses you get. They're not all going to be things that need to be done immediately, that you need to drop your planned work. So this gives you some ideas on how you can start to negotiate your time. So we don't want to automatically drop what we're doing. And sometimes we do that. There are reasons why we do that sometimes as well. Sometimes what we're doing is maybe tough, boring, we're not making progress with it. And responding to a request gives us a reason to maybe pull away from it. So it sometimes is a reason to procrastinate from something we don't want to do, but it may be the most important thing to do. And responding to others, we feel we're busy in the moment and it feels good. But remember that feeling at the end of the day when we have the nagging, I was busy all day, but did I really get done what I needed to do? That's what feeds into that. We want to consider the other person's needs too, obviously, as I've said already. If we have no planned work, it's harder to negotiate. So if you had nothing in your plan to do, and someone asks you to do something, it's harder to say, I can't do that right now, because why? Why can we not do it? But having a planned piece of work it gives you more confidence, maybe to be a little bit more assertive to negotiate your time. So again, any thoughts on any of that? Any questions that you have? Just keep popping them in. So let's see some ways we can do this for real in practice. So somebody asked me to do something, some ways that I would respond to it are here on the screen. And of course, you need to develop what works for you in your own language. But I just wanted to give you some practical examples. And yes, of course, I can do that for you. I'm working on X now, so I can do it for you by lunchtime or whatever it is in an hour's time, etc. Most people can wait an hour for something, can't they? Because when you think about it, you could be at a meeting and you may not have picked up the email for another hour now anyway. So, we need to start thinking about that and be a little bit more assertive. Yes, of course, when do you need it? That question that I mentioned already. I plan to work on X. Will I prioritize this? So that would be in a case where the person is involved in the work you're planning. It's all to do with the same project, which is the priority now. Sometimes that can prompt someone maybe more senior to say, oh, I'd forgotten that you were going to be working on that. No, that is more important. I'll ask somebody else to do this other piece. That's sometimes the response you get. So what I'm saying is having a baseline plan that you agreed or communicated, that does help you because it can remind someone, oh, that's what you were going to get done this week. So it helps you to say yes on your terms. How can you respond and what will work for you? So I want you to take a moment maybe and even, take some of the responses that I had on the previous screen when someone asks you to do something. Is there anything that you can do to respond differently to the way that you currently do? And if anybody wants to share anything, please do that. So I'll just give you a moment to consider that because it is good to apply the tips that I'm giving you to your environment and your world, and maybe have something you can take away at the end of it that you can actually apply straight away. And if there's any different scenarios that I haven't covered there, just pop them in the Q&A. You can share your response if there's a way that you would approach it, or if there are responses that you use currently that work for you and you want to share them with other people. I know people would be delighted to see them. Saying yes on your own terms, another little technique that can help us is to ask the yes/no question. And again, this is something that we don't really do, but it's a great little tip because it helps us in the moment to consider what's the right decision. So the yes/no question is, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? So it comes back to our planned work or our baseline plan, or it could be just things that we're carrying in our head that we're hoping to get done this morning. So if someone comes up with a new request, what are we going to be saying no to? And we often don't think about it because, as I say, we kind of jump in, we do the new request, and then it's only later in the day that we think, oh, I was supposed to get time to do that. And now we're running into a meeting this afternoon and we didn't get the time to do the prep that we'd planned to do or whatever else it was. So what are you saying no to? Planned work, as we said already, someone else's request, perhaps. Lunch, how often do we do that? And, you know, I have spoken briefly already about the holistic approach to our productivity. We miss lunch, our productivity dips in the afternoon. We do not perform, we do not get done as much as we would have done if we took a break and ate some good food, some brain food. So skipping lunch is counterproductive. We're stealing our productivity from the afternoon. And kind of think of it like your work day. You know, it's like an athlete. You work hard in the morning. You need to have a break, refresh, refuel so that you can then peak again in the afternoon. By missing our lunch, again, occasionally we do it, we all do. But if we're doing it on a regular basis, we really are impacting our ability to be productive in the afternoon. What are we saying no to? Leaving on time? Maybe we have a commitment that we're going to let people down. So, you know, in the moment, if you say yes to this request, you have to connect that I'm not going to get out on time. I'm going to let that person down. So the reality is we have a fixed amount of time. Something has to give. So in the moment, what am I saying no to if I say yes to this? I'm not going to be able to deliver that report for the person that I promised. I'm not going to get to see my family member on time. What am I saying no to? So yes, no in your head. It's a really quick way to do it because, as I said, sometimes we say yes, we're in it, we spend the time, and it's only later we think, actually, I really shouldn't have given that so much time. And sometimes when we ask the question, it may be that we say, I have to say yes to both, but maybe I'll just give this half an hour. I'll get back to someone with some key points so they can move something along rather than maybe spending an hour or an hour half of my time. So it can really help you focus your mind as well. Let's look at the urgent requests. I want to spend a moment doing that because people often say to me, I have to say yes to everything because everything is urgent. And, you know, everything can't be as urgent as everything else. But let's look at urgent requests. And, you know, there is an opportunity to analyze them a little bit because they actually can fall into two buckets. The first is the genuinely urgent things. It just cropped up, it was unanticipated, and you need to respond. There's no decision. So they're the ones that we're not going to really juggle or negotiate our response time. It's genuinely urgent. We have a responsibility to respond and help in that situation or provide the information or do whatever we need to do. But there is another bucket to the urgent requests. And this is where there's an opportunity to maybe make some changes. We can't do it immediately. It might just be a little bit longer term. Things that became urgent, were they left until the last minute? So do you get a request from someone who leaves it till the last minute? And this might feed into the question we had earlier about someone's style not being compatible. Could have been requested earlier, you know, so that you could have had some lead in time and planned when you were going to do it. And if that happens on a recurring basis, then there's an opportunity to maybe change that dynamic. So it could be down to poor planning. So maybe you have a stakeholder who asks you to do things. It's always at the last minute. You can't change their work style. But what we can do is maybe nudge them to change how they interact with us and how they give us those requests. So an example would be, and I think I have it on the next screen, it became urgent. It could have been done in advance. So when it's something that, particularly if it happens on a regular basis, so somebody maybe asks you for figures or an input or something, and they always leave it to the last minute, to up to their deadline, and you know they're under pressure to deliver. So of course, very hard to negotiate our response time there. It's useful to reflect on that. In the moment we do it, because when something's urgent, there's pressure, there's stress. We're not going to start, you know, brainstorming different ways of working at that time. So I wouldn't advise you doing it there and then. Deliver it this time, but make a note to come back to it. Make a note to kind of jot down how often it happens, as I've said before, review afterwards. Maybe it is a recurring thing. Every month, this person asks you to do the figures at the last minute. If you had some warning or planning time, you could get it done at a time which suits you. So it isn't always at the last minute. Can we do it better next month? What can I change about the process and how we interact? So, one of the ideas is to get out in front of it, anticipate it. So to interact with that person at the start of the week, saying, just want to check in with you and see, do you need anything from me this week? I'm planning out my week. I want to make sure I have time for it. That sounds like someone who's in control, someone who plans. It's quite assertive, but it's very much, I want to make sure I have time for what you need. But you're giving them a subtle message that, if we don't plan this, if you don't tell me now, I may not have time for it. And obviously, you have to take that suggestion and put it in your own words, what's appropriate for your relationships. But it does nudge someone to think about what they need from you that week and maybe say, yeah, they'll say, yeah, Wednesday, I'm going to need the figures. And, then you can maybe start to plan it, to put the time in for it. Whereas on Wednesday, when it crops up and they need them straight away, it can throw your whole day into disarray. So getting out in front of things and anticipating it is a way to reduce some of the things that become urgent. How do they become urgent? Because they were allowed become urgent. Are there things that we can plan better in advance? Maybe it's our own planning, maybe it's someone else's planning. So we can maybe nudge them by asking those questions. So there's that suggestion. I'm planning my week, want to check when you'll need something. It is a subtle shift, and it helps us maybe to land the question with the other person while also being available and helpful to them. So again, if you have any reactions to that, any ideas, pop them in the chat. The thing to remember is, sometimes we feel uncomfortable about doing this. We feel we need to be available to others at all time. It's not about you. It's not about what you feel like doing. It's not about you letting people down. It's about the work. It's about the best use of time in your role. And, if we have to negotiate with someone or do something at a different time than what they request, it's because we need to work on other tasks. It's not because we don't want to do it. We have deadlines to meet and we have to deliver in our role. So it's kind of to remember that. So we have the assertiveness to maybe push back a little bit as appropriate. And, you may discuss this with your team lead or with other colleagues and just say, where is there any room for change? So, it's almost to park the personal feeling about it, because if you do need to change anything, it's because you've deadlines to meet and some of these unplanned requests are keeping you away from that. So remembering what's in that blue box, it's not because we don't want to do it. So it's important to keep that in our minds. With that, it's really useful to do an analysis of your stakeholders and look at what your response time should be. So this is the template that I'm sharing with you. And it's useful to discuss and agree those expectations internally, maybe with your colleagues, with your team leader, or with those stakeholders, whatever is appropriate. So just put a bigger version of it up on the screen so we can see it momentarily. So it's to list out your key stakeholders and to discuss with whoever is appropriate, who needs an instant response, but who is it okay to respond to within 4 hours, by the end of the morning or by the end of the day, or maybe 24 hours is okay for some of our stakeholders. And challenge ourselves as a team with your colleagues, with your team leader, and maybe present some data to your team leader and saying, can we discuss some of this? And often we'll find that we've slipped into responding to everything instantly. And is there an opportunity to have certain buckets, certain stakeholders, or maybe it's certain emails that come in, in relation to different queries and requests that we can agree that, there's their 24-hour requests, their 4-hour requests, that what is our service level agreement? What have we agreed? And maybe go back to that, and there might be things in place, or maybe things need to be put in place. So with our external stakeholders, the opportunity to do that is at the start of a relationship. So with current stakeholders, it may be hard to change that now. But if you're putting in place an agreement with a new stakeholder, that is part of a service level agreement. I'm working with you. They'll know that you've lots of different people. They'll have lots of different people. Let's agree what our turnaround time is going to be. So when I get requests from you, I can commit to being X. And once you have that clarified, it does again help you with your response times. with our internal stakeholders, agreeing priorities, anticipate in advance, review and approve. So, linking in with people every now and then and saying, I just want to reflect on how we're interacting. I want to make sure I'm available for your requests. What works for you, what works for me. And you can even, position it that sometimes, I can't respond when the request comes through because I'm busy at meetings or whatever. So, if you can send the information through in advance, that would be fantastic. Maybe you can have a lead in time that you agree. So coming to the end, I want to pull it all together with the key tips for managing your stakeholders. Don't default to yes in every situation. There will be situations that maybe aren't as urgent as they seem. So, you can say, when do you need it? Use the yes, no question to have clear in your head what you're saying no to. So what are you moving by doing this one? And, is that something that you're going to let somebody else down? What is the priority? Easier to decide what's the priority if you've set your priorities for the week, and particularly if you've agreed that with someone else. Set and agree your expectations at the start of an engagement with somebody, or even reflect on them now with your team leader and your colleagues, and review with others. I can see we have another comment coming in. Issues I have is where I have deadlines and need information or work done by stakeholders who are not reporting me, but it's not a priority for them. Any tips for dealing with that? It goes back to, I suppose, the idea of checking in with them in advance, giving them plenty of warning so they have a lead in time, so we're not asking them at the last minute. So that idea of getting out in front of it and saying, giving them time to do it. Also, if it's not a priority for them, but they still have a responsibility because you're dependent on them, maybe there's some communication that needs to happen through your boss and their boss so that they, it's clear to them that they do have to deliver for you. So that can be a way of approaching it as well. And then back to that first question, I did promise I would come back. At what point do we know the stakeholder style is not compatible? That's quite a deep question about, how to cut ties, etc. So not knowing the background to it, I will share my email in a moment. If you do want to pick that up with me separately, that would be fine. But even just their style, hopefully maybe the tips around anticipating in advance and checking in with them ahead of time and trying to get them to deliver what you need to deliver, but by giving them more time to do it, saying what's going to suit you, so trying to adjust their style to suit what will help deliver for you. So that's the best I can give you on the fly. But as I said, I'll share my email address, and that's available to anyone on the session who does want to follow up specifically with any particular situation, because I know this is a really tricky topic. And it's very hard to cover every aspect of it in the hour that we have. It's a very nuanced topic because it is really around communication, isn't it? It's relationship management. It is a big topic. So if anyone does want to follow up, you're more than welcome. But I'm hoping those key tips there have given you some food for thought and something that you can take away and even discuss with somebody else and prompt the discussion with your team leader if you're finding that you are spending time, I suppose, on things that are pulling you away from your planned priority work that you maybe feel are not so high a priority. So I'll just share, just to remind you that there's a copy of the slides. You'll be getting an updated version of it. That stakeholder response analysis template that you could take maybe to your boss or have it in a team meeting and prompt a discussion. And here are my contact details. So that's my email address there, moiradunn@beproductive.ie. I've put my LinkedIn. If you scan the QR code there, you can connect in with me if you want to connect that way. And my website, there are lots of articles and resources and tips there. So there is an article on managing your stakeholders. So all the topics I deliver, there would be a blog written on them as well. So plenty of information for you there. And if you want to subscribe, you'll get updates every month and be able to keep in touch. So at this point, what I'd like to prompt you to do in the remaining couple of minutes that we have is to share anything that you think has resonated with you, even just a key takeaway, what's resonated, any outstanding question that I didn't cover, or an answer to any of these questions here. what can you improve? Is there anything that you will stop doing? Is there anything you will start doing based on the tips that I've shared with you today? So I'll open that out to the group, and even if you're not clear about any changes you're going to make yet, I'd love you all just to pop in and share your key takeaway from the session. So what is the thing that most resonated with you? We'll pause for a moment and let you do that as we come up towards the end. We have a few minutes left, so I'm happy to stay here to have a look at the different comments coming through. Let's see, fantastic. We've got a weekly priority list. Fantastic. I'm delighted that's resonated with you, because honestly, that is the building block for any kind of productivity, and feeling control of your time, winning back time in your week, not defaulting to yes. Thank you for that. Sometimes you need to be selfish to protect your own time. And, thank you for that, Michelle. And it's not selfish when you think about it. And that's what I want you to all to go away with, that you're not being selfish. You're making the right decisions. You're prioritizing. It's back to your role. So, so that we don't feel guilty about it. But we really need to do that, because we're protecting our time so we can deliver time blocks, top priorities of the week. So this is a fantastic list of tips as well in the chat if anybody wants to download it. Set the priorities at the beginning of the week. Stop immediately saying yes. I'm delighted that resonated, and block out time in your calendar. Ask when something is needed. Fantastic. So a lot of the tips have resonated, and it's great when people share, because it just tells us what's hitting the mark. Don't read out. Oh, sorry. So yeah, that's all the tips. So that brings us to the end, and I'm going to finish up the session, because I want to let you go on time, because you possibly have to go off and do other things. But I really encourage you to reflect on the key tips, pop back to them there, and to maybe use the template to prompt a discussion so that you can take control of your time. And, it is the right thing to do. It's not being selfish. It's purely so that you can deliver. So thank you all for coming along on our session. Hope to see you again at a future session, and best of luck. Connect in, as I've said. And if anybody does want to follow up on a specific scenario, you're more than welcome to email me at that address there. And with that, I will end the session. Have a good day.